We have an interesting subject this morning, and I realize that for a great many folks, this is a sensitive area. But I think in fairness to all concerned, we must face into some of the phenomena of our times. You will probably remember, some of you at least, that following World War I, there was a tremendous emphasis upon spiritualism. A number of very brilliant leaders of public thought, men of the caliber of Sir Oliver Lodge, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Professor Hyslop, became concerned with survival, the continuance of consciousness after death. Obviously, the cause of this tremendous emphasis was the tragedy of the war itself. Millions of young people died in that war. Their parents, their friends, even their children became deeply involved in the hope of the survival of consciousness. This resulted in extensive research in psychic phenomena, and to a measure at least, this research is continuing to the present time. But at the moment, the situation seems to be somewhat different. The average person in this country, at least, has not had the experience of the parents of World War I in Europe. They have a different point of view, and modern psychology, psychic phenomena, appear to be focused in a different direction. And in the last year or two particularly, I have been almost inundated with requests to explain psychic occurrences in the lives of people. I get letters from all over this country and Europe, and people constantly want to know what some psychic experience they have had means. Sometimes they tell me the experience. Sometimes they think I ought to know it already. But after having read the description, if they had one, we are all more or less nonplussed. There seems to be no general, natural, significant, practical way of explaining a great part of this outburst of psychic pressure that is in the atmosphere at the present moment. You pick up some journals and publications, and you think of Egypt, and you remember the thousands of little charms and talismans and figures that were worn around the necks of the Egyptians and buried with them. In the paper we find that today similar charms and talismans and amulets are being offered seriously on the grounds that they have psychic influence. So over a period of 4,000 years, the same phenomena continues. This is something we have to give a little thought to. I've looked around, and I'm not interested in exposing or downgrading the psychic seeking of the human being. Far from it. I feel quite convinced that there are some perfectly honorable and perfectly practical and reliable consequences in some cases. But the true mystical experience is comparatively rare. And much of the material that comes in almost every day for consideration simply cannot represent a valid approach to the problems involved. I think one of the most interesting problems that we have to consider is the source of this tremendous torrent of psychism that is now moving in on us. And looking around, it seems to me that perhaps Buddhist philosophy comes the nearest of any philosophical structure that could have a bearing on the subject. Buddha was the one who first psychologically emphasized the importance that which comes out of the individual in most cases is something that went into him from his material environment. In other words, the human being receives through the sensory perception certain impressions. These impressions coordinated by the mental unifier. After a time, these impressions, interpreted, digested, and unified, come out again through the individual, and he attributes them to some source within himself. Let us see if we can make this point a little clearer. Wherever we have social insecurity, we have pressure upon the psychic life. When things run easily and comparatively smoothly and the individual is relatively secure, his mind does not run to this type of thinking. But when he is variously bewildered, when he does not know what to do next, when he does not know how to evaluate the conditions of his own life, he then rushes to someone else for help. Now, psychology, from a scholastic standpoint, has had much to do with trying to rationalize the problems of society. But there are other problems which psychology cannot handle because of its limited perspective. These are problems of the individual's personal interior life, where he is uncertain as to his own conduct, where he is confused. This confusion becomes part of his subconscious. This remains very much like Pandora's box with the lid down until the individual does something to lift the lid. One of the things he may do to try to lift the lid is to practice some kind of meditational disciplines. He may try to unfold his own consciousness in an effort to reach into himself for greater security. Now, how he is going to do this is again a problem. I suppose that there are 50 or 100 different recommended ways to unfold inner consciousness. Most of these ways differ in one respect or another. The individual reaching out for some way of cultivating his inner faculties is very likely to practice some type of metaphysical discipline, concentration, meditation. He is apt to try almost any type of method of concentrating attention upon the unfoldment of internal factors. This, in many instances, arises in persons that are not at all equipped to handle this type of situation. They firmly believe, in fact in some cases they are taught to believe, that all they have to do is to practice some meditational discipline and the inner life will move out through them. Or perhaps under certain conditions, through these types of disciplines, they will be brought into contact with superior beings, hierarchies or orders of life, which will enable them to get the solutions they seek to the problems they face. Now, this situation has resulted in a series of very strange circumstances, which I think are probably best approached through the Buddhistic philosophy. We have to have some kind of a framework for this. We have to rationalize it or organize it before we can examine it. If we wish to assume that the individual over the course of years has become involved in a load of psychic pressures within himself, if we realize that all kinds of things that happen to him on the material plane of life have left scar tissue, have built various pressures into his subconscious personality. There is the person who arose in a divided home. who never had proper parental relationships. There is another who came from a bigoted or irresponsible family and had no proper encouragement for the development of normal faculties. We have individuals who had bad marriages and were unable to cope with the family responsibility problems. Also, we have some graduates from the drug culture. We have individuals that 10 or 12 years ago were tied into the drug subculture. Many of them have worked out of it and are no longer involved in it. But the record of it, the pressures of it, the consequences of it are still in themselves. We also find others who are financially insecure. Jobs are hard to keep. The individual has not had sufficient training to feel secure in his employment. He may have extravagant tastes which he is unable to gratify. He may be picked up in the inflation, or he may be trying to buy a home and cannot get the necessary loans to take care of the deal. He may also have health problems. Many people are finding tremendous nervous ailments developing from tension, stress, frustration, and self-pity. All of these pressures retire into the individual. And under normal conditions, perhaps they will remain there for his entire lifetime. If he is a materialist and has no belief in any mystical or metaphysical factors in daily living, then he will simply ignore this and go on being sorry for himself, but rationalize it in terms of his external circumstances. If, however, he is more religiously inclined, if he is looking for some inner understanding of the phenomenon that he is faced by, then he begins to attempt to develop some form of internal spiritual security. He takes the attitude that he must, from within himself, release values which will take care of him. He is taught this. Many groups are advertising it. Many individuals are working with each other in these problems. The idea being to break through the outer crust of fear and anxiety and find a quiet, serene inner life behind the problems of daily existence. But here is where the Buddhist philosophy steps in. It points out that when you open the door between the objective and the subjective, you open that door into a world with which you have very little experience. You also take a very serious chance that when this door is open, the flood of your own inner psychic stress is going to pour out into the objective life. Instead of being redeemed and at peace, you are going to be in greater confusion than you were before. This confusion, however, is not always easily rationalized. It is not something in which the actual incidents of your previous physical experiences will be revealed to you. You will not be able to find always or very often that some pressure in your psychic life can be immediately traced to a particular incident in your environment. In many cases, it becomes a kind of vague form of reaction. This reaction most always takes the form of symbolism. And symbolism is a very difficult thing to work with. If the pressures within yourselves come out into manifestation through symbols rather than through incidents, then you have the same type of problem that is involved in dream symbolism. The individual awake can release a dream underworld from within himself, and this presenting itself in all kinds of forms and all types of symbols, emblems, figures, and devices can present a very serious problem. Now, one of the more simple but definite examples of this is the study of dispositional and character attitudes.